Okay, we're going to look at critical reading here. Now, we're going to be deliberate with this program. Some of the other programs we're going to work on moving through quickly, work on your reading speed. But this one we want you to be proactive with. Maybe pause it and see if you can come up with the answer yourself. Or you can pause it and review what's been said. You can even go backwards and see what's been said previously. Take control of this so that you learn and work on your critical reading abilities. This is where you can work to make those SAT passages be a source of points rather than misery. As always, we want to read the questions over first. Number 1, what does the antique bust example in lines 5 and 7 demonstrate? What conflict does the first paragraph address? The discussion of a revealed forgery in lines 14 to 17 suggests what about forgery? This passage suggests that one can only be spiritually fulfilled from art if, and Breedil's opinion in lines 21 to 23 helps to do something. Why do some forgers reveal themselves according to paragraph 4? What does the reference to all art collections in line 36 suggest? A group of supposedly genuine objects in line 42 serves to. The author mentions all of the following reasons for preserving forgeries except. And what does the final paragraph argue is the main characteristic of forgeries that makes them valuable? Okay, we had quite a few line references. Wanted to know about what one paragraph did, the first one, the final one. Note number 9, we want to know and notice the reasons for preserving forgeries so that we can determine what they leave out. If we are to evaluate art based on its aesthetic virtue, why is a successful phony any less worthy than original? With an awareness of this puzzle, many have tried to negate the significance of authenticity. Richard Payne Knight, a celebrated academic and art collector, after finding that an ancient bust of the Greek goddess Diana was a reproduction, commented that age has no place in evaluating art anyway, as its beauty will pour forth regardless. Likewise, when the buyer of a Renaissance portrait discovered that it was indeed a modern forgery, she was actually pleased that so talented an artist was still living. In the late 19th century, in fact, museums would sell fakes of remarkable quality at a comparable price to the originals. This practice, however, has since ceased. Most art scholars speculate that aesthetic merit is not the sole valued characteristic of art in the marketplace. When a famous work is declared phony, for instance, somehow its value instantaneously depreciates since it's no longer a connective cord to the past, to an ancient, enduring genius figure, or to a spiritual presence. Despite its sustained aesthetic value, the work is still significantly altered. Not aware that a supposed Vermeer painting was a fake by Hans van Meegeren, scholar Abram Breedil commented on it. How magnificent it is for an art lover to find a work by a genuine artistic genius, in its original form, without alteration, as it was in the artist's hands. And how beautiful! I readily will declare it Vermeer's greatest work. When Meegeren was exposed as a forger, his works suddenly, and not coincidentally, seemed grotesque, not at all similar to Vermeer's. Meegeren's exposure as a forger and the subsequent reaction of the art world was aligned with the pattern of artistic forgeries of the past. Incidentally, scholars never discover the forgeries based on their mundane and maladroit appearances. Rather, the forgers themselves, unable to resist taking credit for lauded art, end up revealing themselves. This pattern, that art scholars regard fakes as great works of genius before they're exposed as forgeries, has become quite normal in the art world. It is evident that all art collections have numerous pieces by forgers more skillful and indeed more lucky than Meegeren. The practice will continue. Technological advances may expose many of these forgeries. However, the age of many works cannot be methodically pinpointed, and when analyzing age is rightful, the work may be held up against a group of supposedly genuine works that may themselves be tainted. And that is exactly the primary gripe against forgeries. Not only do they swindle money from buyers, but also they belie our conception of reality itself. Our understanding of time and age is suddenly ripped out from under us, and our subsequent anger is not surprising. But what is truly mistaken is the tendency to destroy known forgeries because of this anger. If the past mistakes make way for improvements in the future, that would be enough to validate their consideration. But fakes supersede just that role. They are a means by which we can realize that our perception of the past is constantly in flux, by which we can develop new techniques for analysis. They do, in fact, warrant consideration. Okay, question number 1. What does the antique bust example in lines 5 through 7 demonstrate? We're looking for what the bust of the Greek goddess Diana demonstrates. Well, it says that it was a reproduction. Yet, despite this, the collector says very clearly that age has no place in evaluating art. Its beauty will pour forth regardless. So in this collector's opinion, it doesn't matter that it's a reproduction. It's beautiful on its own accounts. So examining the answer choices, we see that in A, that collectors prefer purchasing forgeries over originals is off target. He's not talking about which one he prefers. He's simply saying it's beautiful on its own account. If we drop down to D, we again look and say that they'll not purchase from dealers who are not reputable. That's off topic. Dealers aren't mentioned in here anywhere. And the majority of collectors can discriminate between forgeries and originals. That again is off topic. He's not saying that. We have two attractive answers here. In B, it says that many collectors purchase aesthetically beautiful works for extravagant prices. Well, he may be implying that they would go ahead and purchase these aesthetically beautiful works anyway, but not for an extravagant price. Price is never mentioned there. So that leaves us with C, very clearly C as a matter of fact, that many collectors value beauty over authenticity. They simply want the aesthetic value there. Question number 2. What conflict does the first paragraph address? We need to be sure and keep in mind when we're reading this first paragraph that we're looking for a conflict. Remember, we're looking for a conflict in this paragraph. Well, initially it's talking about evaluating art based only on its aesthetic value, and then it questions why is a successful phony any less worthy than original. It talks about many have tried to negate the significance of authenticity. It talks about Knight saying that age has no place in evaluating art, as beauty will set forth regardless. And it talks about in the 19th century the practice where museums would sell fakes of remarkable quality at a comparable price to the originals. But now we get our conflict. This practice, however, has since ceased. Okay, remember we want to focus on the conflict. Well, in A, the conflict wasn't between those who sell forgeries and those who deal them. Nor was it a conflict, as they suppose in B, between those who forge great works of art and those who actually create the works of art. You'd think there'd be a conflict there, but it's not mentioned in the paragraph. The conflict between those who collect privately and those who have public exhibitions? No. And nor was it between those who collect art and those who deal art. The conflict clearly was between the value perceived in a work and its actual authenticity. The paragraph was really dealing with how the perception of a work of art, how it's appreciated, can be influenced by its actual authenticity. And it was questioning whether that's a good practice. Here we have a line reference question. Lines 14 to 17 refer to a revealed forgery. And what does that tell us about that forgery? And it says here that when a famous work of art is declared phony, somehow its value instantaneously depreciates. And this is the key phrase: since it is no longer a connective cord to the past, to an ancient enduring genius figure, or to a spiritual presence. So the argument here is that that connection to the past has a value to it. Once again, we evaluate the questions. A, that the investor loses financially because of it. No, it's referring to the past as being of value. That it's valued by some collectors equally as a modern piece of work? No, that's off topic completely. That it should be honored for its own place in history? No, it didn't talk about the work of art's place in history. It talked about it connecting to it. And then we have E, which has part of it right, because it says it's not as engaging. No, it's not, without having a link to the past. So this is one of those answer choices where the first part of it looks pretty good, but then they negate it without monetary value. The monetary value wasn't brought up. But the key is the past, and it says that it's no longer a signifier of the past. So C is clearly our answer. This question refers to the passage on the whole and says the passage suggests that one can only be spiritually fulfilled from art if something happens. We're looking for what would cause spiritual fulfillment. Let's look at the other side of it first. It says when famous work is found phony. its value depreciates. Why? Because it's no longer a connective cord to the past, to an ancient, enduring genius figure. Or, and here's our key phrase, a spiritual presence. It's the only place in the passage where spiritual presence is mentioned. Remember, we're looking for the source of spiritual fulfillment, and the only phrase that tied that in was where it was connected to the past. So if we look and see, A, the work remains visually unchanged, no, we weren't referring to that as the reason for spiritual fulfillment. Art scholars lauding it for its aesthetic value. Indeed, it's talking about the aesthetic value isn't what gives us the spiritual fulfillment. The viewer knows the artist's other work well. No, that's way off topic. The work has not been seen by a large number of collectors. Again, that's off topic. But E, if the work is authentic and real and connects us to the past, according to the passage, we get spiritually fulfilled. Number 5, we want to know what Breedill's opinion helps us do. Remember, we're talking about a line reference here, but we're looking for his opinion. That's the key. Okay, remember we're looking for his opinion here. Now, they make it clear that he's not aware that this Vermeer painting was a fake. And they quote him as a scholar. So let's see what he says. How magnificent it is to find a work by a genuine artistic genius in its original form, without alteration. I readily declare it Vermeer's greatest work. Well, he's got an opinion here. And the fact that he's a scholar, he's representing a collective opinion. But now in line 25, we see a change. When Megarine was exposed as a forger, his works suddenly, and not coincidentally, seem grotesque, not at all similar to Vermeer's. Okay, now what does his opinion tell us? Clearly, he thinks this is a great painting. Let's look at the answer choices. A, it doesn't show that obscure works of art by renowned artists have not yet been found. Now B, how the history of a work of art influences how viewers perceive it. That could be it, because it goes on after he's talking about how great a work of art this is, to say, later on, it was discounted once it was found that it was a fraud. Let's keep that one in mind. Let's look at C. Illuminate how the completeness of a work determines its value. Well, that's off the subject. Okay, D here has some impact too, because illustrate no one can distinguish between an original and forgery. Well, he certainly didn't do that. I mean, he didn't distinguish between an original and forgery, so we need to consider that one too. We look down at E, show that all art can be forged with ease and accuracy. No, again, that's off topic. Now we've got to distinguish between B and D. The distinction here is we look at what the purpose of his opinion is. All his opinion is doing is confirming that this forgery was a good one. He's saying it's a great work of art. So looking at it just on its own, he's saying it's a great work of art. But once it's found to be a phony, and hence its history is determined, it changes how we perceive it. It's now a forgery. So B is our better answer. Question number 6 wants to know why forgers reveal themselves, according to paragraph 4. Well, first we're talking about Megarine's exposure as a forger. It talks about, incidentally, scholars never discover the forgeries. Rather, the forgers themselves end up revealing themselves. And the reason for that is they're unable to resist taking credit for lauded or praised work. If we look at our answer choices, clearly they're not doing it to evade legal action. They're not doing it to bewilder art scholars. They're not talking about forgery being ascertained as prosaic. Prosaic, incidentally, means boring, ordinary, dull. And they certainly aren't straightening out any confusion. Rather, they're trying to receive merit for these highly esteemed works of art. They got to take credit. And question number 7 gives us a line reference. And what does the reference to all art collections in line 36 suggest? We see in line 36, all art collections have numerous pieces by forgers more skillful and indeed more lucky than Megarine. And then it continues, the practice will continue. passage continues by explaining how it's hard to distinguish between forgeries and authentic works of art. But clearly it's saying all art collections have some forgeries in them. Well, if we look at A, we can see that even museums cannot avoid forgeries altogether. That could be an answer because it says all art collections contain these forgeries. Let's make sure it's our best answer. B, it says that museums sometimes even track down forgeries to exhibit. No, it's not going that strong. It's not talking about the museums wanting forgeries. They're not saying that some valuable works of art cannot be found in museums. And some museums replace actual paintings with forgeries. It sure doesn't go that far to say that. It simply says forgeries can't be avoided. Number 8, another line reference. Here in line 42, we want to know what a group of supposedly genuine objects serves to do. Here it's saying when analyzing age is rightful, the work may be held up against a group of supposedly genuine objects that may themselves be tainted. Well, what it's saying here is you're using kind of a control group. You got to compare forgeries with what they think are authentic. But the passage has indicated it's so hard to tell forgeries from authentic work that even these supposedly genuine objects may indeed be forgeries. If we look at our answer choices here, we can see that A, these genuine objects are not being used to identify which forgeries will be tested. They're not being used to handle market price increases. They're not being used to keep a forgery collection contained anywhere. Okay, we got D and E here. To discover whether scholars will be deceived by forgeries in E. That's an attractive answer. But those are not being used to see whether the scholars will be deceived. That's not what they're indicating. What they're indicating is that these authentic works of art are being used to compare against other works of art to see if they too appear authentic. Remember we said we had this one coming. This is one that's kind of a factual one, and we want to know where the author mentioned all of the following reasons for preserving forgeries except. What was not a reason for preserving forgeries? Well, let's look at, there are two words down here that may be throwing you a little bit. Mitigated means to lessen or minimize or moderate something. And if you juxtapose things, you're placing them side by side for comparison. While we're on that one, we know that was a reason given. It was just done in number 8. So D is one of the reasons. E, to illuminate the various ways of perceiving history. Certainly the author talked about that as a way, remember, of tying us to the past. A, to enliven us with the skill of the forger. Remember it talked about some people reveling, even some people reveled in the skills. And to question our beliefs about art's value. That was in the very first paragraph. We're talking about the comparison of the aesthetic value and its perceived value because of its authenticity. But the author didn't say anything about preserving or keeping forgeries around or they're having a value to lessen market prices. Prices were mentioned, but forgeries were never connected with keeping those costs down. And what does the final paragraph argue is the main characteristic of forgeries that makes them valuable? Well, the last paragraph starts off talking about the gripe against forgeries, and it talks about our understanding of time and age have suddenly been ripped from us. It gives the negatives there. But then it talks about they supersede just that role, and they're means by which we can realize that our perception of the past is constantly in flux, by which we can develop new techniques for analysis. This is the key phrase. They do, in fact, warrant consideration. Now, warrant means earn or deserve. This is why they deserve consideration, because they help us develop new techniques for analysis. They help us realize our perception of the past is constantly in change. They're instructive. Let's look at our answer choices. Now, aesthetics are the study, the appreciation of beauty or good taste. Well, yes, aesthetics came up a lot in the passage, but we didn't talk about it being risky. It didn't talk about forgeries being more frequently attempted as being a reason for keeping them around, or them being valuable. Seldomly accessible? No. Somewhat accepted. Well, there's a case that could be made for this, that they're somewhat acceptable or somewhat accepted, but that's going in line with they are valuable. It's not saying why they're valuable. The characteristic that makes them valuable, remember we said, was they're informative or educational. That would be unexpectedly illuminating. We learn things from them.